Hello, everybody. This is Pasha Marlowe, and you're at the Let Pleasure Be the Measure podcast. And today, super excited to bring to you a friend, a dear, dear friend, one of my closest friends, Sarah Mclaughlin. And Sarah has just written a book, not just one book, her second book. So I'm super proud of her. She is a social worker, a parent educator, and an author, amongst a million other things that we'll probably get into, but super excited you're here. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and I love seeing
Yay.
your smiling faces, and hello to everybody listening and watching.
Yes, I'm sure people are going to be shocked to know that you too are from Maine, because most of my amazing female guests have been from Maine. It's just fantastic.
Interesting.
Yes, I'm thrilled to announce that. So here you are, a neighbor, a friend, and a phenomenon. And even if you lived across the world, I would want to know you. There go my notes. There you go. So
Look
Sarah,
away, she's gonna get her notes.
I'm going rogue. What I always think is cool is that even though it's a pleasure podcast, we come to the table with often some serious topics. And the book you just wrote is called Raising Humans with Heart, right?
That is true.
Your first book, What Not to Say, a huge success, now followed up by this new one, which I'm just so excited about because I think it's important, especially now with the changes in the world. And I'm raising a highly sensitive, empathetic child, and who I want to raise with as much heart as possible and find ways to create boundaries so the big-hearted people don't get stomped on, as I'm sure is part of your book. So can we start with boundaries? Because I feel like boundaries are like
the
key to
boundaries
everything.
is so great. Before we jump into boundaries, I just loved what you said about raising your son with heart. And there is a little bit of a double entendre in the title. As far as raising humans with heart also means our own hearts, right? So that we as parents are in our hearts, but that we also are raising our kids to have big hearts, as you said. So I just wanted to point that out since you made such that lovely statement about that. But
And if our hearts are, if we're big-hearted and wholehearted and empathetic and highly sensitive and raising a little one who is as well, there's a whole lot of emotion in the house. So I can't wait to how to navigate it.
Yeah, we can definitely step into that too. Well, boundaries is an awesome place to start because that really is what I think allows the most pleasure to come into a relationship. Relationships without boundaries, whether they're adult to adult relationships, adult to child, parent child, it doesn't really matter. But if you don't have boundaries, there can't be as much intimacy or honesty, I don't think. So boundaries, and I always teach boundaries to parents along with kindness, because I think that as a carryover, at the beginning of my book, I talk about sort of like this manual that we all inherit from our own childhoods, because the way we were parented is our first template for parenting, right? Is what we saw our parents do and what we experienced with their parenting of us and our siblings if we had them. So checking that out and seeing kind of where boundaries fell in your family of origin is a nice place to kind of think about how you bring yourself to boundaries. Because I don't know about you, but the way I was raised, there was not a lot of opportunity for children to have boundaries, right? It was like the parents did the laying down of the law, and there was very much an authoritarian approach. So there was not as much of a two-way street, which can get a little sticky because we have these beliefs and behaviors that kind of pop up when we're parenting that if we're not mindful of them, they kind of take over and run the narrative. So taking some time to kind of sift through that and look back at how boundaries were handled, if you were allowed to have boundaries, right? That's how we teach kids consent from a young age, is we allow them to have boundaries and we respect their boundaries. Which, if you have a certain view of kids, can feel a little counterintuitive, right? Like they're little, we know more than them, we're running the show. It doesn't maybe occur to us to stop and check in with a 2-year-old about what they want to be doing in the moment. And also that could be completely exhausting and go the other way. But bringing back the piece about kindness is that, and emotions that you brought up, is that there is a way to set boundaries that is both firm and kind, so that you're setting the boundary and you mean it, but that you are still available for the emotion that comes with it. Because nobody likes not getting their way, whether they're 4 or 40. Like, that's no fun. If somebody
Yeah.
sets a boundary because they're the grown up in the situation and then the child is not getting what they want, that's no fun. And there's going to be some feelings about it. And so that's okay. Like, you don't have to do anything different because you set a boundary, your child didn't like it, and now they're expressing their dislike in whatever noisy, inconvenient way. If we have a strong boundary that their big emotions are not a reflection of us, B, something we need to do anything about other than say, that's really hard. I hear you. That's a lot of upset. I totally understand. Um, then we can kind of stay relaxed in our nervous systems. I know this is not easy. It was not easy for me. And I had to do a lot of practicing to stay calm in my nervous system when my child was having a big giant meltdown, because nobody held that space for me. So I didn't have sort of the muscle memory to then be able to hold that space
Mhm.
for my child. So that's where it can get a little tricky. And there's you find where the boundary is, so you know what work is yours to do and what
Right.
work what is not. Your child gets to have their feelings. You don't need to do anything about that, but you might need to do something about how you feel about those feelings.
Yeah. And the more emotional or tired we are, it seems harder to hold to those boundaries because we don't want to
Oh yeah.
maybe deal with the energy it takes to even respond to the consequences of our boundary.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It's so true. Like, don't say yes unless you really mean it. Don't say no unless you really mean it. And also, it's okay to change your mind sometimes. Like,
Mhm.
you know, I was having a conversation with somebody online about this very thing, and I said, I call that changing your mind with authority. Like, sometimes if
Okay.
you just realize I really can't deal with this, so I'm just gonna, with authority, change my mind instead of like, oh, fine, you can watch more TV. You can say, you know what? I thought about it, and you were having a nice time. And so I'm going to go ahead and give you another 15 minutes. And just your tone of voice, that you are still in a leadership role, it doesn't kind of chip away at your authority in the same way that
Yes.
you might
Versus
give
fine,
in.
fine,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Like, I don't want to argue, just fine.
yeah. Like,
Yeah.
if you're throwing in the towel and it
Yeah.
shows, then that can, create certain dynamics in your relationship that one might rather avoid.
Yes. And are you careful about creating boundaries between you and your partner, for you, your husband, in front of your child to model that behavior? Is that part of
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Um, Even just doing things at your own convenience, right? Like checking in and not. I always know when I'm out of alignment with my own boundaries, if I start to feel resentful. So that's one of
Mhm,
my that's one of my
mhm.
tells to myself. And I'll be like, oh, I'm feeling resentful. I should have said no to doing this favor for my partner or my child. Even if it's just like, we get me a glass of water, right? Like, sometimes the answer is sure, I will happily get you a glass of water. But
Right.
sometimes if I'm doing something else or I don't feel like it or whatever, and I say yes, but then I feel resentful, I'm like, oh, I should have said no.
Interesting.
Now I know that I should have said no. And so for me, it's been sort of a process to be able to pause and check in and be like, should I say yes to this
Mhm.
request? Or do I need to check in with myself and decide where's my boundary in this moment?
Yeah.
And should
It
I say yes or no? And boundaries shift and change depending on where we're at, right? Depending where our kids are at. Um, but the one person that knows is you, and you'll know if you don't nail it.
yes. So there's a correlation between setting boundaries and listening to your knowing or your intuition and checking.
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think I think so. Do you think so?
Well, you're the expert.
Oh, you're so
Yes,
funny.
yes, yes. No, I absolutely do. And I think to your point in the beginning is like, am I just setting these boundaries because I'm continuing a story that I was told in childhood,
Yeah.
or a story that's been told for generations? Or can I actually create my own boundaries according to my own sense of knowing, that's going to be completely unique to my home and my family, and that's okay, and that we set a lot of boundaries in our house, around Jamie's choosing his doctors, which is normally not
Mm,
something I would allow a 13-year-old to do, but he needs to be involved in his medical care, to the point where otherwise there's not trust. And so for us, setting boundaries is a lot about the trust building to an extent. Obviously,
Mhm.
he doesn't want to take meds. We still have to take meds. That's just the
Yeah,
way it is.
right.
There's a bit of that, but we have given him more power in his medical care than we ever thought we would. And it
Mhm.
seems to be helping navigate it. So it's just one of my, and then with Xbox, oh my gosh.
Sure. Oh
I
gosh.
could,
Yeah, the
yeah.
screens. We won't even go there. But I love what you said about seems to be working, because
Yeah.
it speaks to, the subtitle to my book is not a how-to manual, because I could never write a manual for anybody else to how to parent their child, because neurodiversity, like that, we are a neurodiverse
Yeah.
species, and there's just no way for me to ever have a formula or a magic bullet or anything for any behavior. But that statement you made seems to be working, speaks to that it is a little bit of trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's a dance, right? The boundaries piece is a dance, the figuring out what is how much power to give your child. And that's the slow process of them growing up.
Yes.
Is that they slowly take on more and more responsibility, more and more power, they make more and more choices, they have more and more sovereignty and autonomy, and that's all lovely, but it's not a straight line, right? It doesn't go from like
Right.
baby to 25-year-old, which is really when brains are done developing, and
Yeah.
it's a straight line. Like it's not.
Mhm.
And how much parents could or should let go of the reins in any given situation, I certainly couldn't tell you how
Right.
much your personal child can handle at whatever age, right? It's
Right.
very unique. And so that's where it becomes trying to get out of your head, and where you might have all those stories about how kids should be, and parenting the child that is in front of you,
Yes.
and relating to them in that moment about whatever it is that's happening.
So your book is also empowering parents to check in with their own truth, which is awesome. And
Absolutely.
within those boundaries and that structure comes freedom, because then I assume there's more flow in the family, because it's not so much chaos and triaging every day because you've
Right.
set boundaries. And
Yes.
so with that freedom, in theory, there would be more time for, I don't know, pleasure or self-care or filling our cup.
Yes.
And so when that opportunity arises, do you have any recommendations for how parents can start to navigate that, even within the couple, like to feel balance in who has who has more self-care to be able to make it through the day that day, like, oh,
Yeah. Right.
I had to go to the grocery store and you got to go meet with
Right.
friends. And last week you met with friends. And this week I want to meet with friends. Like we have this negotiation.
Hmm. Right. I know one of the things I say, I can't remember exactly what it is. I'll never find the page number, but especially moms, and there's lots written about this. You could find an article about the default parent or the second shift from the 70s. Like there's all kinds written about, how women bear the mental load, right? Like,
Yes.
we might be equally split in these other areas, but that women typically carry more of a mental load of like the big picture of the family calendar, et
Yeah.
cetera, type
List
of
in the head.
type of stuff. Yeah, the list in the head.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this is where all these, soft skills come in. One of my chapters is called "So Emotional Competence is not a soft skill," right? Like being able to know what you want and be able to ask for it and set those
Mhm.
boundaries, and making sure you're part of the equation, right? Like, and we also get fed this thing from a young age about, that women should be selfless caretakers, right? And so a lot of us just step into that story and don't deconstruct it or examine it or get curious about it enough to say, this is really not working for me. So I'm gonna, as my friend Bobby says, ASK to GET, like ask for what you want, right? Like you can't, it's not fair to not ask for what you want and then feel mad that you don't have what you want, right? Like
Exactly.
make it happen as much as you can, and pass things off. And make agreements with your partner. That's where those communication skills, the conflict resolution skills really come into play. And that's such awesome modeling too for your kids,
Yes.
right? If they're seeing you negotiate, well, here's what works for me, here's that actually doesn't work for me, and you know, talking it through.
Mhm.
Anything that your child sees you do in that vein is amazing modeling. And it does bring more opportunity for pleasure and fun, right? If
Yes.
everybody's bandwidth is stretched so thin that they can't, even think straight, then nobody's like in a good mood, right? And those moods can be kind of
Mm.
like a hot potato that get handed around a family unit. I've got this mobile behind me. This is my son's mobile from when he was a baby,
Aw.
but there's like a family systems theory thing,
Yeah.
right? Where like if one little
Balance.
animal is
Yes.
out of balance, then it affects the whole, like if I went and touched one of those little
Yes. It would
ponies, it would
shift.
make the whole thing move, right? So if I'm the mother or the father, whoever's, you're co-steering the ship of the family, and you're feeling all out of whack and out of balance, your like wobbliness is bringing wobbliness to the whole. And then you
Absolutely.
wonder why your kids are like off the wall, right? But
Right. Right.
but I'm pouring everything into them. Well, maybe maybe we should move the boundary back just a little bit, and
Yeah.
have a cup of some space for yourself to I don't know whose quote it is, that you can't fill from an empty cup. So
Mm.
you can't. So you have to
Mhm.
pause and fill it. And small bits. It doesn't have to be, it's lovely if you can get away for a day, a half a day, whatever, with friends, like you were mentioning.
Mhm.
But it also can be, especially for people with younger kids, it can be 2 minute,
Yes.
a 2 minute thing. I have a downloadable like parent reset program. And one of the things that comes with it is just like a page of like parent fill-ups, like
Good.
that are quick. Some of them are quick, some of them are a little longer, but just like ways to pause and take a
Right.
breath and get in your body like
Yeah.
5 minutes.
And if you have the 2 to 5 minutes and your intention is to take those 2 to 5 minutes to relax, or you're seeing it with that orientation, you're far more likely to settle into it and appreciate it versus like, oh, had I known I'd have 5 minutes sitting on the toilet, I would
Yes.
have appreciated it more.
Right. Or you like all of a sudden you've been scrolling for 5 minutes and like your brain is just still kind of
Yeah.
fried. I do
Yes.
that. I totally, why am I not like meditating or like centering right now? Instead, I'm
Right.
like, yeah,
And so with all of this, hopefully time for a pleasure and self-care, then we could become more light and playful in
yeah,
our families, which is, I think, always the goal and the intention of the day. But darn it, even though I teach it, I can get to the end of the day and realize I never actually played with my child. We were all kind of parallel playing, I'm playing
yeah.
with my podcast and he's playing with his Xbox and John's playing with basement dirt. I don't even
Oh
know.
gosh, the
So
basement
yeah,
dirt.
construction, his point.
No,
But then we go to bed and we're like, wow,
yeah, yeah,
we hardly checked in, not you know, not to
yeah,
mention didn't play with each
right.
other. So finding play, I like recommending sneaking it in with
Mm.
tiny habits of things you're already doing. If you're already making dinner, can you do it while singing to 80s songs
Right.
and
Always.
yeah. You're all
Oh,
like
always
it's
80s
just
music at my house.
that's the default at your house. Oh
Oh,
my gosh.
totally. For sure.
What do you recommend for bringing more play into the family and fun?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for anybody listening who has younger children, or knows anybody with younger children, like younger children, that's their first language is play.
Mhm.
So, we tend to forget as grown-ups, so we can get very serious. Um, but I've been surprised how much, that silliness. So I was gonna say that, like silliness and being funny and, taking acting like you don't know what's going on, right? Like when my son was younger, my husband had a character that was just called Dumb Guy. And Dumb Guy, he didn't know Jack. And so whenever, be like, oh, I don't know, am I supposed to eat my dinner with a shovel? I don't know. And he had this like voice that was just
Character
like a
voice.
kind of like a Muppet, like, I don't know. But it was hysterical. And so it shifts the mood. Like anytime you
Yes.
can bring humor, that's why I love what you do. Like
Thank you.
anytime you can bring a little bit of humor, which is sometimes hard to bring it, right? Like, especially like the last year has just been so stressful. Everybody's nervous systems are kind of shot. Like
Mhm.
being able to pause and muster funny, right,
Mhm.
is tricky.
Mhm.
But kids so appreciate it. Like still, my son's 13 and my husband still, pulls out that gig every once in a while and it still gets laughs, right? Like
Yes.
it's still funny. And so anything that's just like, cracking a joke and especially when it's a situation where tensions could run high, like when
Mhm.
my son was a little more tweeny and was in a super sassy phase, he would, if he said something just in that tone, right? Like learning to manage our own triggers so that we can still stay playful is like, super hard to do, but it has such a great payoff because he would like say something in a bratty tone and I would be like, hashtag sass factor 3000. And I would like, just, like that was my response. Like, I didn't say like, hey, quit talking to me that way, which is like,
Right.
honestly, my first reaction, right?
Yes. You still called him out though.
Yeah, like I'm still saying like, hey, I'm noticing your tone, not
Mhm.
appreciated, but I'm doing it in a way that's like a little bit playful. So
Yeah.
being able to bring that playfulness as a first line of connect, because it keeps a connection in
Yes.
place, right? And
Yes.
that's really what I'm talking about in this book. Pam Leo wrote the foreword for my book, and her book, which is brilliant, I think it's probably about 15 years old now, still totally relevant and brilliant. It's called Connection Parenting. And
Okay.
she just really has taught me, like, is what you are doing, is your interaction building connection or breaking connection? Because if it's
Mm,
breaking connection, you're going to need to come back and repair it if you want a good relationship
mm,
with your child, which we all
mm,
do.
mhm.
Otherwise, like if you can catch it before it happens, which it's gonna, there's this rupture and repair thing that's gonna keep happening, right?
Yeah.
But if you can bring a little bit of play and keep the connection while you're still like doing that corrective thing, it's just a little nicer and smoother. And, you know, their brains are not developed yet, right?
No.
Like we can't talk to them like they're little adults because they're not.
Exactly. And we walk this line. My son's same age as yours, 13,
Yeah.
and um he tries to do his medicine every day. He hates it every day. And so now we're doing like, when you did with toddlers and babies, like choo choo,
Open
like
up.
open up. And there's a part of him that wants to be coddled and taken care of. And
Yeah.
there's a part of him that just thinks it's silly. And we get big eye rolls half the time,
Of
but
course.
it always works and it shifts the mood.
Yeah.
So being willing to play and get silly, and then allowing, if you're fortunate enough to have a partner, if you're not in that space, like allowing your partner to maybe take over whatever
Totally.
task that is, if you're in this heavy dark space where you could really use some help to lift up,
Right.
bring some levity to the room. So yeah, and I always find with my animals, my pets, that they're really helpful for that too, because if all of us are in a crappy mood, the
Mhm.
dog is always willing to play. And so we pull from his energy.
Yeah, smart. So smart. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's like a oxytocin. That's the love
Yeah,
hormone, right? The feel good hormone. And
yeah,
anything, like hack yourself, pull up. That's why people share all these like baby animal pictures, right? Because they like,
absolutely.
and baby pictures and like all of whatever kittens, like whatever puppies, whatever gets your
Yes.
oxytocin flowing, like bring it up, have it be your screensaver, like,
Yeah,
whatever's going to help your body get into that state.
absolutely. Which brings us to a whole nother level of pleasure, because if we were talking about bringing deep pleasure in our private moments, how do you talk to your kids about pleasure, as in self pleasure, masturbation, and just on the whole, what is
Yeah.
your philosophy on it?
Right. Well, the last chapter of my book is called Creating Inclusive Communities. And it's really
Mm,
all about like bringing an anti-bias lens out
mm,
to, gender, race, sexuality, etc.
awesome.
And so I touch on that very briefly, just in terms of, teaching kids anatomically correct body part names from the time
Mhm.
they're little. That's, I've been, preaching that for 20 years since I was a preschool teacher. And letting kids in on the fact that like sex feels good, right? Like that should be part of sex ed. It's really important for kids to know that. I feel like it's leaving out a big equation if we
Yeah,
are focused on reproduction and the mechanics, and
the
that's
dangers.
the dangers. Oh gosh, yeah, not to mention the dangers. But um I don't know what, I think my line in here is something like last I checked, most people grow up and actually enjoy having sex, right? Like that's the goal. Don't we want people who we've raised to grow up and have a good sex life? Like,
Yeah,
why
there's
would you like keep them in the dark about all of that
yes,
stuff? And
not
I
much
know,
pleasure.
you've had other podcast guests who
Mhm,
dive more deeply into that, but it's one of
mhm.
the ways to keep to reduce bias in your child is to teach them about sex and sexuality, and that it's just part of the spectrum of neurodiverse humans, that some people are gay, some people are straight, some people are bi. Like that's just part of the world that we live in. Some people are black, some people are brown, we have people from
Mm,
all over the world, speak different language, have different cultures. One of the things I started saying to my son from a young age was, in our culture, like when I was telling him something, I would say, in our culture, actually, that's from
yes.
my friend Misty. when in our culture, this is how we do it, but that doesn't mean it's the way to do it
Right.
or
Right.
the only way to do it, or that every family looks like ours. And having those kinds of foundational conversations and laying that foundation with your child makes it grows them up more open-minded, right? Like for whatever they're going to encounter in the world. And that makes our world a better place because
Mm-hmm.
it makes the world safer for all different kinds of people.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. I love that you bring the inclusion into it. It's just it's so important. And we're living in, very white Maine.
yes, we are.
And I raised my two older kids in also white New Hampshire. And
Ah,
so when they went off to college, I was thinking back, did I include that in the conversation a lot? Like, this is how our family works. This is how like our town and community and culture works, but this is
yeah,
not what you're going to see out in college and beyond. And I think it's so important to expose kids to all
yeah.
different cultures and different books. And how do you deal with that with your kids and your clients? Certain
Yeah,
resources that you
I
recommend?
do. I do. There's a wonderful resource. Actually, it was created here in Maine at Bates College. I was almost
Cool.
said the wrong college, but at Bates College in Lewiston, it's called the Diverse Bookfinder. So
Really
it's diverse. I actually do reference it in my book, diversebookfinder.org. And
great.
you can type in like whatever you are looking for. And it has gotten a lot better in the last, 10 years. It used to be really hard to find.
Okay.
You had the Snowy Day and you had
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
handful of other books that showed children of color in them. And
Right.
it's gotten, now there's lots of other books that actually address differences and the
Good.
landscape. I actually have a whole list because I was doing workshops about that for a while.
Good.
But Diverse Bookfinder is an awesome go-to. And I also do make a lot of recommendations for other resources in my book because I
Mhm.
try to write short books for parents because I know that parents are really busy. Both of my books are like about 100 pages, which because I know, and I try to make all the information in the vignettes like really bite-sized because there's just, you just can't, right? Like
Can
if
absorb.
you're not passionate about, like I joke that I read all the parenting books so you don't have to, right? Like so I read them all because I'm obsessed with parenting and I love it and it like fills me up. But if it didn't, like why, who has time, right?
I used to tell people, because I used to own fitness and yoga studios, and I would watch every infomercial of every new fitness toy and every new fitness program. And I would buy them all, and then I would
Try
try
them
them
out.
all. And I'm like,
That's
I know
awesome.
you up are in the middle of the night. You want to try them all, but I will try them so you don't have to. I will buy them so you don't have to. And then I just, give them the good parts in class.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
That's
love
awesome. Yeah. So like we all have our passions, but then we can learn from
exactly.
each other. And I tried to just distill a lot of information and offer a lot of resources in a short,
Yeah.
tiny, look how skinny it is.
It's so cute. Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
It's very accessible.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was my goal.
And does your child now, knowing you're a parent educator, does he just sometimes talk to his friends and be like, "Ugh, my mom
I
is
don't know.
so
I don't know. Haven't probably,
aware of what I'm
probably.
doing and thinking?"
He, from a young age, because I have been I logged my time in therapy. I have been examining my manual that I inherited from my parents, and
Yeah.
they did some things really well, and they did some things really terribly, like a lot of people, right? And so I have told him that I was not raised with the kind of space and
Mhm.
equanimity and whatnot. And I just was really honest about it. Like, sometimes I get triggered because this is not how it went in my family. And so I have to stop and think about how I want to respond when something happens, because I don't want to respond. I don't want to do it with the first thing that comes to my mind, right? Which
Yes.
it's not gonna build connection, right? I'm thinking of Pam and it's not gonna build connection. So I'm gonna stop. I tell a story where I just stop and I sit down and I literally look at my 3-year-old and say, I have no idea what to do right now.
Yeah.
No idea. No idea. Because the things I could think of to do are going to break connection, all three of them. So I'm
Yeah.
just not going to do them. And I'm going to sit here till I think of something. And then guess what I thought of? Play,
Play. Comes back
play.
to play.
Yep. So,
Mhm.
then I engaged him in a playful manner and boom, guess what? He was dressed and we were off to school.
It's
So
transformative, and
it
with adults
is.
too, and we think that we outgrow it or don't
No.
have time for it or shouldn't value it or prioritize it. And busier and more chaotic and heavier the day gets, the more important it is to bring pleasure and play into the
Absolutely.
day, to revive you, to keep you fueled, to remind you that like
Yes.
life is hard and good and
Yes.
that it's going to be okay. It's not
Yeah.
I love the saying, I think I'm not going to remember the name of the person who says it, but the only thing impermanent is impermanent.
Oh, yes,
You know,
yes,
this will
yes,
change. This moment
yes.
will not be this hard
Forever.
tomorrow or
Or
forever,
as
hopefully.
my grandmother used to say, this too shall pass.
Yes,
That
yes.
was her saying, this too shall pass. But
Yeah.
yes, the only thing permanent is change for sure.
Very cool. Well, I love your book.
Thank
I had
you.
the pleasure of reading it before it was published,
Thank you.
and it opened my heart and it reminded me of things that I really wanted to be more mindful of and intentional about in my parenting. And I think you're a brilliant resource. I'm
Thank you.
so honored to have you as a friend and a colleague. And yeah, thank you. How can people buy your book, Sarah, if they want to read it?
So it is in the pre-sale period. So from
Okay.
now until July 15th, you can order it on IndieBound, you can find it, but also at Barnes and Noble and on Amazon.
Okay.
And then should be in local bookstores after that. And if you can't find it at your local bookstore, you can call them and ask them to get it.
Good.
But then they will all get shipped out in the middle of July.
Excellent. And if somebody wants to email you, ask you a question, or just reach out to you for a resource, is there a good email or way to
They
do
can find me. There's a contact form on my website, which
that?
is
Okay,
my name, sarahmclaughlin.com.
great.
That's the best way to find me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you can put that in your,
I will. I'll put it in the
yeah.
show notes. Absolutely. Your website and the link to purchase your book. Yay.
Awesome.
So
Thank you
proud
so
of you
much.
for
Thank
finishing the
you.
thing and doing it,
Yay.
putting it out there and helping parents around the world. And then in turn, their kids, and then in turn, their kids and their
That's how
kids,
it works, right?
on and on and
It's a
on.
cycle.
Changing generations with heart. Love it. Love it.
Oh, thank
Thank you,
you.
Sarah.
Thank you,
If you
Pasha.
yeah, absolutely. So please reach out to Sarah for all things parenting with heart. And if you want to continue the conversation about pleasure or play with me, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me at pashamarlow.com. That's my website, or on Facebook and Instagram at Pasha Marlow. And if you liked this conversation and like this episode, please rate it or share it, subscribe, all the things. You know what to do. We really appreciate it. It helps us spread the word. So thank you all out there for listening. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.